The cameras cut to the familiar glow of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, the stage drenched in sharp studio light that turned every gesture into performance. The audience leaned forward, laughter already primed, expecting another night of clever banter, political jabs, and the sly smirk of a host who rarely lost control. Bill Maher sat comfortably in his chair, one leg crossed, his expression that of a man who had skewered presidents and pundits alike and survived every round. Across from him sat Elon Musk. His presence alone shifted the room's balance. No matter how casual he tried to appear in his black jacket and open-collar shirt, he carried with him the gravity of an empire. Tesla, SpaceX, and the chaotic, unpredictable force of Twitter, now rebranded X. Musk's name was not just a headline, it was a storm. Every word he spoke could ignite markets, enrage journalists, and divide the internet into armies of praise and scorn. The audience clapped louder than usual, a nervous edge in their enthusiasm. They knew they weren't watching just another guest. They were watching the man who had become both a hero of free expression and a villain of reckless disruption, depending on whom you asked. Tonight, he wasn't here to discuss rockets or electric cars. He was here to defend something bigger, and to do it in the lion's den of comedy turned political crossfire. Maher leaned in, smiling as though he had already won. "So, Elon," he began, his voice dripping with irony, "you've decided the world needs another billionaire in charge of public speech. Because what could possibly go wrong?" The audience roared with laughter, the line landing like a jab to the ribs. Musk didn't laugh. His lips curved into something closer to a smirk than a smile, his eyes narrowing just slightly. He let the noise settle before speaking, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Well, Bill, maybe what could go wrong is when speech gets decided by a handful of people who think they're smarter than everyone else. That's when you lose democracy." The laughter dimmed, replaced by murmurs. Maher raised his eyebrows, pretending amusement. "Ah yes, the great savior of free speech. Because nothing says democracy like a man worth 200 billion deciding what everyone else gets to say." Gasps and chuckles rippled through the audience. Musk's expression didn't shift. He leaned forward, hands folded, the weight of his words deliberate. "It's not about me deciding, Bill, it's about not letting anyone decide. You don't solve speech by censoring it, you solve it by debating it." For a moment, the exchange felt less like an interview and more like a courtroom duel. Each line thrown like evidence, each reaction from the audience a jury's response. The lights glared brighter, the cameras circling to capture every flicker of expression. Maher waved a hand dismissively, trying to maintain control of the room. "Come on, Elon. Don't pretend this is some noble crusade. You're a businessman. You bought Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it because you like the power. Let's not dress it up in philosophy." Musk's jaw tightened, his voice colder now. "If I wanted power, Bill, I'd be trying to control speech, not free it. There's a difference." The words cut sharper than the audience expected. The laughter faltered again, replaced by the kind of silence that means something heavier has entered the room. The atmosphere changed. The host who thrived on ridicule was suddenly meeting resistance, not softened by humor, but sharpened by conviction. Every viewer at home felt it. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a collision of worldviews, one rooted in comedy skepticism, the other in defiance against the institutions that shaped public thought. The night was only beginning, but the hook was set. What was meant to be light conversation was now poised to become a battle, and neither man intended to back down. The tension in the studio was subtle but growing, like a storm humming beneath polite laughter. Bill Maher had been here 1,000 times before. This was his arena, his stage, his crowd, and when in doubt, he always reached for his sharpest weapon: comedy. With the flick of his wrist, a tilt of his head, he could turn skepticism into laughter and laughter into dominance. Tonight would be no different, at least that's what he believed. Maher leaned back in his chair, his posture loose, casual, as if to remind the audience that he was the one in control. He tapped his stack of blue cards on the table, eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a man about to land his first punch. "So, Elon," he said with mock sincerity, You've rebranded Twitter into X, which, let's be honest, sounds less like a social media platform and more like a drug that kids buy at raves. Was the goal to make speech freer, or just branding stranger? The crowd erupted in laughter, applause spilling into whistles and cheers. Maher smiled, drinking in the approval, letting the wave of humor wash over his guest. He turned slightly toward the camera, raising his eyebrows, sealing the joke as though he had just exposed something undeniable. Musk didn't blink. He allowed the laughter to ride itself out, his expression unreadable, lips pressed into a faint line. Maher noticed and leaned in again, unwilling to let silence fill the air. You say you're protecting democracy, Maher continued, his tone playful but edged. But really, Elon, you're just giving every lunatic with a Wi-Fi signal a megaphone. I mean, do we really need more conspiracy theories floating around out there? More lies about elections, vaccines, lizard people running the government? Freedom of speech is one thing, chaos is another. The audience clapped, nodding, their approval palpable. Maher let the applause linger before piling on, his voice shifting from humor into a more serious register. You're not just some guy running a company. You're controlling the world's town square. That's dangerous. And frankly, a little terrifying. Musk's eyes flickered, the faintest sign of annoyance breaking through. He adjusted his posture, leaning back but tightening his shoulders, a man preparing for impact. The camera caught the moment. His silence, his pause, as Maher gestured dramatically toward him like a prosecutor summoning a guilty man to respond. The studio lights amplified everything. The smirks, the gasps, the calculated timing of Maher's jabs. Musk sat in shadow for a moment waiting, but Maher wasn't finished. He pressed harder, sensing the audience's energy behind him. You see, Elon, Maher said with a grin, people don't elect you. Nobody voted for you to decide who gets the microphone of civilization. You just bought it. And I think it's fair to say, the world isn't entirely comfortable with one man controlling the information highway. You're not a philosopher king, you're a CEO with a midlife crisis. The line detonated. Laughter roared through the studio, wild and sharp, a wave of approval cresting over Musk like a jeering chorus. Maher smiled wider, raising his hands, in mock surrender as if to say, don't blame me, blame the truth. But beneath the laughter, a shift was beginning. Musk's gaze hardened. He leaned forward at last, elbows resting on the table, his voice a low rumble that cut through the audience like static before a storm. So what you're saying, Bill, Musk murmured, is that people are too stupid to decide for themselves what to believe, that they need you or someone like you to tell them what's acceptable, and you dress it up as comedy, but really it's control. The laughter faltered. The audience, still mid-clap, slowed, unsure whether to cheer or hold their breath. Maher blinked, momentarily disarmed by the calm ferocity of the reply. He forced a chuckle, tilting his head. Oh, come on, Elon, don't get dramatic. I'm just saying, free speech doesn't mean free insanity. Somebody has to draw the line. Musk's voice sharpened. And who draws it, Bill? You? The words sliced into the silence, pulling the crowd into a different mood entirely. For the first time that evening, Maher's smile faltered. He tapped his blue cards again, masking the slip, but the air had shifted. The exchange was no longer comedy. It was combat. And in that subtle turn, the stage was set for the night's confrontation to escalate far beyond punchlines. The laughter had thinned into uneasy murmurs, the kind of sound that fills a room when an audience realizes the game is shifting. Bill Maher had always been the conductor of this orchestra, directing the rhythm of jokes and applause. But now, across from him, Elon Musk leaned forward, breaking the unspoken rules of talk show choreography. He wasn't waiting for the next question. He was seizing the floor. His voice cut through the tension, firm and deliberate. Bill, let's be honest. The problem isn't free speech. The problem is who gets to decide what counts as truth. And right now, that's being decided by the same people who claim to be impartial but actually control the narrative. The audience stiffened, some clapping, others murmuring. Maher tried to interject with a laugh, waving his hands. Oh, come on. Nobody's sitting in a dark room pulling the strings of what people think. That's a conspiracy theory. Musk's eyes narrowed. He spoke without raising his voice, but each word landed heavy. Of course they are. You know it, Bill. Mainstream media frames what people see, what they hear, what they're allowed to debate. And the second someone questions it, they're labeled dangerous or irresponsible. That isn't protecting democracy. That's manufactured consent. The phrase hung in the air, sharp as a gavel strike. Some in the crowd erupted into applause, others hissed in disapproval. The split was visible, like a crack running down the middle of the studio. Maher leaned forward, trying to wrestle control back. His tone sharpened. Elon, you make it sound like journalists are puppet masters. They're not. They're professionals. They're the guardrails keeping society from drowning in misinformation. Without them, we're lost in chaos. Musk tilted his head, a faint, almost ironic smile breaking across his face. Guardrails or gatekeepers? There's a difference. Journalists don't just report. They choose what stories to amplify, what stories to bury. And most people never even notice the hand on the scale. The crowd shifted again, energy rising and fracturing. Musk pressed on, his words deliberate, as if building a case before a jury. History is full of examples. Governments controlling information during war. Newspapers smearing dissidents as unpatriotic. During the pandemic, legitimate debate was silenced in the name of safety. And what happened? People lost trust, not in speech, but in the institutions that tried to control it. Maher shook his head, exasperated, but his voice carried less laughter now and more heat. So your solution is, what? Let every crank and fanatic scream whatever they want into the void? You call that democracy? That's chaos disguised as freedom. Musk leaned closer, his tone low but unshakable. Democracy isn't neat. It's messy. It's noisy. It's offensive. But it only works if everyone gets to speak, not just the voices that elites approve of. If you can silence the people you don't like, you don't have free speech. You have curated speech, and that's not democracy, that's control. The studio erupted, half in applause, half in jeers. The division was undeniable. Some leaned forward, eyes bright with agreement. Others shook their heads, muttering under their breath. For the first time that evening, Maher seemed rattled. His usual smirk tightened into something closer to frustration. He glanced toward the camera, perhaps to remind the audience at home that he still owned the frame. But in that moment, the balance of power on stage had shifted. The host who thrived on ridicule had met a guest who refused to play by the rules of entertainment. Musk wasn't laughing, he wasn't pandering. He was building a case, one that dared the audience to question not just Maher, but the very system that claimed to filter truth for them. And as the cheers and boos collided, it became clear. The escalated show was no longer a comedy. It was a trial. And every viewer was now part of the jury. The studio no longer felt like a comedy stage. The laughter that had filled the room minutes earlier had thinned into something jagged, a nervous energy that rippled across the audience. Elon Musk and Bill Maher were no longer simply guest and host. They were combatants locked in a contest of philosophy, their words striking not just at each other, but at the cultural fault lines splitting the nation itself. Maher straightened in his chair, setting aside the blue cards he usually shuffled as props. His voice carried the edge of conviction now, less playful, more prosecutorial. Elon, you make it sound noble, but let's be real. You're not some defender of democracy. You're a billionaire who bought a platform and now pretends it's a free speech utopia. The reality is, when you let everyone speak without limits, the loudest and most dangerous voices win. Hate wins. Lies win. And democracy loses. The audience clapped sharply, the kind of applause that comes less from laughter and more from agreement. Maher nodded slightly, soaking in the support, his expression set like a man who knew he had history on his side. Musk's reply came slowly, deliberate, each word weighed like evidence. And who decides which voices are too dangerous to hear, Bill? You? The media? The government? Every tyrant in history has used that exact argument. They all say censorship is for your own good, that the people need protection from dangerous ideas. But the truth is, they're afraid of losing control. The words landed heavy. The audience murmured, applause sputtering, as if uncertain whether to cheer or recoil. Musk leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Maher, his voice unyielding. Speech is not meant to be safe, it's meant to be free. And when you strip people of that, you don't protect them, you weaken them. Maher's laugh was sharp, defensive. He gestured with his hands as though framing Musk's words as absurd. Come on, that's romantic nonsense. Free speech is not a suicide pact. If your version of freedom allows lies to spread unchecked, then society pays the price. That's not liberty, that's anarchy. Musk's tone hardened. It's not anarchy to let people think for themselves. What you call protecting, I call infantilizing. You don't build a strong society by shielding it from ideas. You build it by exposing lies to the light and letting truth win in open debate. The exchange grew taut, like two opposing attorneys battling in front of a restless jury. The audience became divided, cheers clashing with groans, applause colliding with muttered dissent. Some leaned forward, energized by Musk's defiance, while others crossed their arms, visibly siding with Maher. Maher raised his voice, sharper now, the joke's gone. And when truth doesn't win, when the mob decides the lie feels better than the facts, what then, Elon? What happens when your so-called free marketplace of ideas is overrun with poison? Musk didn't hesitate. His voice dropped lower, almost cold. Then the answer is more speech, not less. If you silence the poison, it festers underground. If you expose it, you can confront it. That's how societies grow stronger, by confronting what they fear, not by hiding from it. The studio air thickened. Maher tapped his fingers against the desk, his smile gone, his brow furrowed as he searched for the next angle. Musk sat motionless, his stare unblinking, a man unwilling to retreat. For those watching at home, the dynamic had shifted entirely. What began as a talk show had mutated into something closer to a courtroom drama, with Maher embodying the case for order and protection, and Musk standing as the uncompromising defender of liberty, no matter the cost. The ideological clash was no longer abstract. It was visceral, charged, and deeply personal. And as the crowd split further, one thing became clear. The debate had moved beyond entertainment. This was a struggle over the soul of free speech itself.